The Brothers Show. The Brothers Show. The Brothers Show. Tonight.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second night of the Brothers Show. That's Carl. Carl, tell us a little bit about that theme song you've got for us.
I had 10 minutes to put it together, and I thought reggae was a good, thing because it's sunny and happy, and we all need more sunny and happy right now.
I think sunny and happy probably offsets the cultural appropriation going on there, but it's great. It's always good to hear you do something like that because we are here to make social distancing cool, and we are here to talk about Rise Up, O Men of God, how to be a better man. Our special guest tonight comes all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. We'll be telling you a little bit more about him in a minute. But first, let me introduce some folks that are going to be hanging out here with us tonight. Pearl, why don't you tell everybody hi and share just a little bit about how you're social distancing these days?
Hi. Well, I'm basically just staying in the house. I've been trying to connect with nature and do what I need to do right now. But yeah, I'm pretty much stuck in the house right now for now.
Well, that's good. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Angel, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good.
Angel's joined by Houston.
Actually, I have Houston who's joining me too, so just wanted to give him a second to sit down. But we're doing good over here. This last week I was with my family, but this week I'm back home. So we're just all keeping safe here, working from home. So
good to have you. I know that Jenna is going to be producing for us as she usually does. Chris, why don't you say hi? Chris is here tonight. We're going to do something. This is only the second night we've done it, but if anybody has any questions, Chris is here to be scrolling down, reading the questions, and taking any comments that people want to make. We're kind of limited in how many people can talk, obviously, at one time, but we want to include as many people as we possibly can in this time together tonight. And with all of that said, I want to introduce again our guest. For a lot of you, he doesn't need any introduction. It's Mike Patterson. Mike?
Yes, sir. Hello, everyone.
What's it like over there in Atlanta?
Well, they're telling us to prepare that this coming week is supposed to be really bad. So we are just hunkering down and praying that it won't be as bad as they're anticipating.
We all have been watching the news, and we know that in different places it's getting a little bit calmer than others. We're really fortunate over here in Oregon. I think we got a great governor in Oregon. We were told to stay in our houses probably a month later than we should have been doing it anyway, but a few weeks earlier than a lot of folks. I know that it was a little slow in some of the states over there near where you are. But and in fact, I meant to say, Scott Davis was supposed to join us with Gordon Ferguson last night, but Scott is sick, and he was feeling a little bit better today.
Okay.
But he doesn't know if it's the virus, but it's some of the symptoms of the virus. And so, Mike, why don't you go ahead and say a prayer to get us started, and why don't we remember Scott in our prayers?
Well, let us pray. Father and God, we come before you, God, and we're asking you to be with us, God, and to watch over us, to lead us and to guide us. Heavenly Father, this is something we've never faced before, but we know you have. And it's teaching all of us to lean more heavily upon you. God, I pray for the brothers and sisters who are battling through. I pray for our brother Scott, that he does not have the virus, God, but if he does, I pray that he will come to quick health, dear God, and do well. Just thank you so much for this time tonight, and pray that you'll be with us, God. We ask these prayers in your son's name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, Mike, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? How long have you and I known each other now?
Wow, that's a good question. I met you back in 1988. So I moved from Tallahassee, Florida to New York City. In fact, I met you in, let me see, Orlando in 1987. You spoke at a conference down there, and I happened to be in that class and got a chance to lead a song. And I say, wow, I led a song for Steve Johnson. That's exciting.
I was speaking, not you.
You were speaking. Yeah, I was a young Christian. I was only a couple of years old. And somehow we got invited to a conference in Orlando. And I was living in Tallahassee at the time, so it wasn't a big deal just to drive down, but it, it was inspiring. I can tell you that it was fun. So in
How long
88,
after that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
in 88, I moved to New York City in that September, that fall of the year, and lived in New York City for 16 years, and it was an adventure.
I remember you and Sean up in the Bronx, and just how much that group was growing and the fun we used to have. We'd get together every Tuesday over at my house there for a while. And then the other thing that's interesting to me, or people might find interesting, is my dad, Les Johnson, and Speech and you started a congregation together there that has now become known as the Path.
That's right.
And something that you'd find, I know you want to pray. You know, my dad has been sick for a long time, and he's maybe in the final stages right now. So I know that you love him and will be praying for him. But Dad always said that he liked you better than me. So you really are like a member of the family. And when we were talking last night, a few of the comments that came in, because our theme is talking about being better men, how to be better men. And I remember one of the comments was just very sincere, help me to be a better man. And I went through the scriptures today thinking about some practical advice just to share as a devotional for the brothers. And I put together a few scriptures that maybe will help us get started. And I looked at 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and it says, rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Don't quench the spirit. Don't treat prophecies with contempt, but test them all. Hold on to what is good. And from that, I sort of came up with, for us to be better, we have to be mindful of how we're acting. He says to rejoice. He says to pray continually. He says to give thanks. This is all about things that we're supposed to be doing. And while this is basic Christianity, this isn't just something to be a beginning Christian. This is something that we have to do all of our lives, don't you think? I mean,
I agree. That I found this quote as we were talking. All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing, by Edmund Burke. And I think all those scriptures you read, it was about action. So many times Christianity, unfortunately, our American version of it is what you do Sundays in a building. And it was a big deal, man. People couldn't go to church Easter Sunday. Oh my gosh. It was such a big deal. I was talking to my mom in Florida, and the governor said if people wanted to meet, that's okay. They needed to be in church. And I'm like, come on, guys. We are the church. This is church right here. So I agree with you, Steve, that a part of men understanding what it means to be a Christian is we got to just do something. I mean, just try our best every day just to do a little bit. Sorry about that. I hit a button accidentally.
that happens. Just don't hit the ejector button. Don't hit escape. Don't hit stay. What other thoughts you got for us? Go ahead. We're here to hear you preach, and you're one of the best preachers I've ever heard. What's on your heart these days?
Wow, I have a lot on my heart. Number one is I'm just praying to be patient, because This is the most I've ever been secluded, locked up in a house. I grew up in Florida. We went outside every day, even when I lived in New York. You know, maybe stayed in a day because of a blizzard, but on the second day, I had to go to the store, do something, and nothing stopped New Yorkers. People were always willing to study the Bible, to meet, no matter how bad the weather was. It was just what you did. But this has been a challenge for me to not be able to do. And I think the biggest thing I'm feeling is inconvenienced. And I know that sounds wimpy because some people are standing in line for food. Some people don't know when they're getting their next paycheck. So I tried not to complain. And I try to remember that although this is uncomfortable, it's not a disaster. I cannot imagine what it's like when people don't know where they're going to get their next meal from or how they're going to pay their bills.
Well,
So
it helps a whole lot, doesn't it, when we think about the precautions we're taking are for others, at least
right,
mostly for others, right? I mean, isn't
right.
is, that seems to be the thing that ought to make us feel like we're doing the right thing. Uh, I I would feel bad if I'm someone who's carrying around a germ, and even if I'm asymptomatic, but I get somebody else sick, that wouldn't be good. So,
You're 100% right. And I've been thinking about how fragile we are because we're not a farming society anymore. And we're so dependent on supply chains. We're so dependent on stores. And I'm like, man, it must be tough that you go into a supermarket and nothing is there. Not like you got chickens running around in your backyard or you have a
uh,
farm. It's like, man, this
well,
is really deep.
in Portland, you can have 3 chickens in your
Oh
back.
yeah?
I'm going to get them before the next pandemic for sure.
Well, maybe I need to move to Portland and get some chickens.
Well, let's talk about that. Why don't you move to Portland?
Oh man, I had fun when I went out there, but we all have our own little vibe. We're having fun here in Atlanta.
I, well, I know that you have a lot of young men that you have trained and are working with. Angel, not this Angel, but your Angel over there, Angel Maldonado. Maldonado. Angel
Right.
is and his wife are leading the congregation. You're the senior, but you're almost finishing up your PhD, right? Aren't we pretty close to needing to call you Dr. Patterson?
Pretty close, man. Pretty close. So I finished up chapter 4. I have to write 5 chapters in my dissertation. And then, of course, it's the most frustrating endeavor ever trying to get a PhD or EDD because they don't tell you what to do. They just tell you you got to write a chapter. You got to come up with the question and find a way to answer the question so they can tell you that's not the right answer. So it's just, well, I never pledged before, but this has been truly interesting. But pray for me. I'm almost done. I would like to believe I'll be done by the end of May.
Well, we'll pray for that. I'm sure you will. Of course, I've been calling you Doc for a long time, and I think a lot of kids have too, because you also teach at Morehouse. Tell us a little bit about Morehouse and what it's like there, and the young men, and I guess some women these days. It's not just a men's school anymore, right?
Nope. No. It still is. It is. It's not co-ed yet because
Oh,
Spelman is right across the street.
all right. Well, I always get confused if they've got a few boys at Spelman and a few girls at Morehouse, but it's still all men. Well,
All men. And a lot of guys come there to understand manhood. So I taught the guys who come from California, Washington State, like, why did you come to Atlanta, Georgia? He said, well, I thought if I could come here, I could understand better what it meant to be an African American man. I said, okay, good. So just being in the environment, guys feel like it's an opportunity for them to mature, to grow up. So I get to teach history, and we talk about everything. We talk about, of course, historical events, current events. We talk about relationships, dating, marriage. It it affords the opportunities just to have a lot of life talks about reality.
what
So it's
what
been
do you
fun.
what do you think is the difference, or you've talked to a lot of young men and trained a lot of people inside the church, guys who are already disciples and look to you as their evangelist or older brother, if not father in the faith or something. How does that compare to what you're able to do with the young men at Morehouse?
Surprisingly, it's very similar. The guys know. I usually introduce myself, tell everybody I'm a professor, how long I've been a professor. I'm also a minister, how long I've been a minister. And then what is interesting, I tell them how long I'm married and how long I've been married. And I've been doing it about 15 years. Just about every year they applauded. They would applaud, and I say, "Wow, I appreciate that, guys." And they would. We started the whole discourse on relationships, dating, and marriage, and a lot of them feel like if they get married, they want to do it once. They don't want to get divorced. They don't want to separate. They really want to do it the right way. Even the most pagan guy wants to have a relationship where he does it the right way. So that usually opens the door to talk about what it means to be a man of character, what it means to be a gentleman, what it means to be respectful. So we have a lot of interesting conversations about that. And I let them know I have a daughter, so I have a different expectation for what manhood is these days.
Well, tell us about that.
Well, you have daughters yourself. I tell the guys how I want a man to treat my daughter, to respect her, to provide for her. So I had a event over here at the house, and one of my Morehouse guys came over. He was also on the football team. So, he came over. We're hanging out. There's a bunch of people here. And he pulled me aside. He said, "I've never done this before, but can I take your daughter out on a date?" I said, "Beg your pardon?" He said, and he was giggling like a little kid. "Can I take her out on a date?" I said, "No." "Whoa, why you say no?" "Because you've talked about your relationships in class." You talked about what your dad has done with his relationships. No, man, we still remain friends after that. But I'm like, because he was so.
If he didn't think that one through, it's impressive to me that he got into Morehouse.
He was a football player.
Yeah.
Nice guy. But what I try to teach the guys that life is serious, and there are the older we get, there are consequences for the decisions we make, and it's no longer just us being teen boys running around having fun. There are just some consequences. There's scars that we leave behind. So try to help them understand at some point, that's a part of manhood. You got to think about someone else other than yourself.
Well, yeah. And, we've got a lot of people that are obviously either shut in or more shut in than they usually are.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to have one of our elders, Greg Gomond, who has been shut in for years battling lupus. He was going to try to be here, but he had a really severe migraine attack. He's coming out of a lupus attack right now.
Wow.
And at some point, hopefully we're going to get to be able to do this and have him share, just because he's got a lot of wisdom and insight to share with people about the challenges of staying in and the things that you can do, to stay pure and to keep your mind set, and things you can even do for other people. And because we've got just so many people right now that are just hungry and thirsty for needing some spiritual direction and some spiritual advice, I want to just really pick your brain on things that you can share with people, to again, going back to First Thessalonians, to holding on to what is good. The next verse says, "Reject every kind of evil." May God himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. The one who calls you is faithful, and he will do it. I'm talking to a lot of people all day long, and I know a lot of people who are not usually tempted with pornography or finding themselves with more idle time. There's just a lot of things. A lot of people that have had those temptations are finding harder struggles right now. People that are struggling, with depression, with anxiety, things like that. What kind of advice? You must be in a similar situation with people that you're talking to. What kind of advice, just practical advice, would you have for everybody about how to be better right now?
How to be better right now. My wife and I did a little devotional earlier today because I went out and I bought a bird feeder. So I put a bird feeder on my porch. And in the morning when I go outside, there are birds there, little red birds, little brown birds, and they're doing all this singing. And I'm like, wow, it's been a long time since I've heard birds just sing because you don't hear the traffic. People are home. And just looking at those birds and the contentment as they fly and sing, I'm like, there's a scripture about that. Worry. Do not worry. And I said, I think we get into trouble when we start to worry. When we start to worry, when we get anxious, and with anxiety, we want to soothe ourselves. So then that's when we start making bad decisions, how we can change the environment, whether it's mentally, emotionally, just to shift the environment. And I tell you, it sounds very basic, but it's really, you got to pray. You got to pray. Then, the beauty of our culture today, we can talk to someone, even though we don't see them. We can get on the phone, we can get on Zoom, we can connect with people. I know when I'm struggling, whether it's just being discouraged, like Monday, I figured out what I was going through because I had a long talk with Angel. This was the first Easter for me as a preacher. I wasn't at church. I mean, and it's like, oh my gosh. And it just wasn't going to church. It's everything that comes with it. Seeing all the guests, meeting new people, then setting up studies, and then going to have a nice lunch and people coming over for extended fellowship. Easter was a whole big event. And for many years when we were in New York, it was huge. I mean, a lot of people came out. It was a production. And this was the first Easter as a minister where I dressed up and sat in my living room.
Did you really dress up?
Yeah, I did. I dressed up and sat in my living room. And then all of a sudden, this dark cloud came over me. I'm like, I couldn't figure it out. But the next day when Angel and I were talking, he said, man, I was so depressed yesterday. I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. Man, preachers live for Easter Sunday. That's what it is. And I'm like, wow, that was, but because he identified it, I was able to identify what I was feeling. We talked it out. We started laughing because we had some bloopers, and he tried to do some different stuff online and it just wasn't working that well. And, the church wanted to help. So 50 people started calling him at the same time, fix this, fix that, fix this. So he's like, said, Angel, what I learned a long time ago, and it's something that Sam Powell used to say, you never get a home run every time you get up to bat. I mean, it's just impossible to have the perfect sermon, the perfect service. But it was much better today, and I felt better today. So I think whatever we're going through, we don't have to go through it alone. I really feel sad for brothers who are in churches suffering alone, like no one can relate to what they're going through or understand what they're going through. Because I would like to believe in the church, there's somebody who can say, yeah, I know what you're feeling. Been there myself, probably will be there again. It'll be all right. So, that fellowship is important. And you love fellowship. I believe that's why you're doing this tonight.
Oh, well, I latched on to something you said a while ago. Yeah, I love fellowship. I like being with people. And the thing you said about changing your environment, it's a funny phrase to use right now because we're sort of stuck in an environment. What you mean is it's like Paul in prison. Look at Paul. Paul was in prison, but that wasn't his environment.
No.
Paul created his own environment that we take part in to this day. I mean, when you read the letters that Paul writes, you have to remind yourself, this guy's in prison when he's writing this,
Mm-hmm.
because he changed. Well, okay, Randy McKean is trying to call me. If I had the technology, I would add him to this thing right now. Why is my thing not letting me decline it? Hush, Randy, be quiet. Okay, there we go. Sorry, guys. If I was better at this, I would have included him on the call. But, you know, we have to remind ourselves when we read these letters that Paul is, but he had the ability through prayer, through writing. You know, I got to think that when he got some parchment and a pen, that was his iPhone. You know, that was his technology. He wasn't there, you know, limited to what he could do, what he could accomplish. And you see, I mean, we talk about his relationships, his Timothys, his Tituses, all these guys, and we learn a lot about them from the things he wrote while he was in prison.
So it sounds like when we have this downtime where our circumstances have changed, we can think about other people, reach out to other people.
We can be as connected as we want to be. We can be as connected to God as we want to be.
Mm-hmm.
We can be as connected to others, because, you know, if you can't talk to your best friend, then you can talk to your next best friend or I mean, there's enough. And so what I hear you saying, one of the ways to be better with if someone is struggling with temptations that they haven't had in a long time, if someone is feeling down, which isn't a sin, but it's a miserable thing, these things that we can maybe pray our way to a different environment. We can reach out to someone and get to a different place, to a different environment. Yeah. Wow.
That's what I would recommend, you know, and then find something to study out. Like I told you, we had a previous conversation, Bema discipleship. So looking at the scriptures from a Jewish perspective.
The rabbi.
Yeah, I'm enjoying that.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Right up the Snake River from us. Well, why don't we go ahead and let some other folks ask some questions? We got Professor Mike Patterson. We've got someone that's talking about how we can change our environment while we're avoiding the germs during this time. Anybody want to ask a question? Go ahead, speak up or make a comment. Join in. It's like a Tuesday night Bible talk.
I don't have a question quite yet, but I do appreciate kind of the idea and the sentiment of like we have this opportunity to be able to connect with one another, and can use it as an opportunity, if we want to, and that's kind of the other step on our part. But we have an opportunity to connect with friends that maybe we haven't connected in a while, or just to stay connected with those that we are close to. But within that, like we can strengthen each other, and it really is important to have that ability. I know this last week, like I was just going through some things, like kind of like some decisions that I have to make, or I'm kind of just trying to process through, and I was finding myself just feeling kind of like alone in that decision, or isolated, and not being able to really talk with anybody about it. But I was able to last week have a Zoom call with some people and just be able to explain kind of what the situation was, and then be able to get their input and their insight on it. And it was a very big benefit to me with my roommates when I am here. So last week was a week where I wasn't at home, but that's been a big benefit as well, is just being able to connect with them. Like we're doing a weekly book club where it's also our time where we get together and kind of check in with each other. But that has been so important for us during this time, just to be able to connect and to see how we're doing, and then also to be able to have something in common that we can kind of discuss and just have that connection. So
I appreciate you sharing that. So what books have you all done?
So far, we've read Jesus Wants to Save Christians by Rob Bell. And
Okay.
we're starting this book on attachment.
Yeah, it's called Attached, but it's on
Attached.
attachment theory.
Yeah, it's like a psychological book. So it's secular, but there's lots of good things in there that we can definitely add spiritual principles and our relationship with Jesus to it. So it's yeah.
So give me a little bit of it. How could you summarize what you've read?
Of attachment or of
Uh-huh.
attached.
Yeah.
There's 3 types of attachment: anxious, secure, and avoidant. And it's about relationships. Somebody who has an anxious attachment style is always thinking about the other person, whether or not they're loved by them, if they can be loved by them. And, like that can be something that we have with God as well. Like, okay, does God really love me? Like, is God really there? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Secure is just like able to connect with other people, feeling confident even though they're not in the room. Like feeling like God is present even if it doesn't seem like it, something like that. And then avoidant would be like, there's just no way God will ever love me, or there's just no way that person will ever love me. So I'm just going to make sure to push them away just so that I don't get my heart broken. And that's kind of the 3 general places that we might find ourselves in throughout our life. And that's what the book's about, trying to figure out where we are on that spectrum and trying to be in the secure category.
Oh, I love it, man. I tell you, a lot of women will love for men to read that book.
Yeah, well, we're trying to be better men. So
I love it. Thank you for sharing it. I got to look it up. Because we go through those things.
Yeah, and I guess if I was going to have a question, is that's maybe a question that I would be curious. How do you, when you're teaching and when you're with your students, and even in the example you shared earlier about the young man who was asking to date your daughter, it sounds like to me he had this sort of maybe anxious attachment style, like that we might get culturally. That's like the sex, drugs, and alcohol, being in the party scene, something like that. It's like, that's cool, right? And if I'm not with my friends and doing those kinds of things, then that's something that I'll be anxious about, because I'm not doing what everybody else is doing. I'm not doing that socially acceptable thing. So it's, that can be something that if somebody's like really starts to feel the impact of their sin in their own life and then on other people, we might swing all the way over into that avoidant category. And I'm just curious how you would maybe coach somebody or like mentor somebody through something like that if they're trying to get it put together a little bit more.
Yeah, and you're right. We fall on either end of the spectrum. We tend to just be people of extremes. So for the guy who loves the world, I've been doing this so long with the Morehouse guys. They know I love them. They line up to have office appointments, and I tell them they're pagans, and one day they'll figure it out. But right now we're gonna plant some seeds, and they just laugh and chuckle. But with the guys who love the party, I try to help them understand. I've been through that phase, and it's so shallow. I mean, what is it you're really looking for? What is it you're trying to fill? There's a void, and we start talking about the void that we have. And then I just mentioned, okay, but after she's gone, or after the high is gone, what's next? What are you going to do? And just for them to start thinking. And it's beautiful. Some of these guys have become Christians and they're doing well. Others of them, they leave, they go to careers, and periodically they stay in touch. And I'm sure in the future, some of them will become disciples. Then, sometimes the ones who could be more insecure are Christians. I think they fall on the other end of that spectrum. And that avoidance, is that what you said? Yeah, like, does God really love me? Do people really love me? I think when we stop and take time out to get to know ourselves, then we can start becoming very introspective. And if it's not done in a healthy way, we become the victims. And sometimes, I had a good friend of mine. he was that way. I mean, it was so hard for him to believe that we loved him. We believed in, and he just wrestled with that thing over and over and over. And what it turned out to be was he never felt loved by his physical father.
Mhm.
So that's what we realized, that he was trying to find a father figure. So, a lot of us have daddy wounds, and we just got to start working through those because they don't go away. So reading that book is good. I'm glad you're all working on it. Got to share it with some of my brothers. So thanks.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Did anyone notice I was gone for 5 minutes?
It wasn't 5 minutes. It was more like 2.
Oh, good, good. And so it kept on going. This this technological age is wonderful, but I don't know if it's bandwidth or what's going on, but whatever I missed, it looks like it was really, really good. Any other questions or comments from anybody?
I had a question. Good to see you, Mike. I was just thinking, here you are working as a college professor. You got all these young bloods who come in hot off of high school, and you work with them for 4 years and then they leave. What is some of the goals you might have for them, or how do you help them to develop to become, instead of maybe a mature youth or just a youth, into a man? What are the things that you try to instill in them?
How you doing, Bob? It's good to see you, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, styling a good hat there.
Yeah, it's so funny. And I just think for us as Americans, college is a rite of passage, because I see guys come in, they're freshmen, they got dreads, they're sagging, pants below the bud, trying to act all cool. And then by the time their senior year comes around, they've cut the dreads, they've fixed the pants, they're not talking a bunch of slang, they're really getting ready to go out into the real world. So I think my goal for them is to be the best individual they can be, and to really have a standard for their life. That's my main objective. And in my mind, I believe becoming a Christian by far makes you the best individual that you can be. But what I try to do, I try to help them to see, let's get rid of some of the misconceptions that you have of Christianity. So that's that's number 2. Let's get rid of some of the misconceptions, because what's very deep these last few years, I've realized I've run into more agnostics than I ever have before. There was a point in time, guys at Morehouse came there to be either teachers or ministers. Then there was a phase where everybody was religious. All these guys at the celebrity church pastor they went to, there were buses coming on Sunday mornings to pick guys up for church. These last few years, nobody's up going to church, maybe 1 or 2 guys. And they make it clear that they're not interested. And I'm like, wow, I've never met Black agnostics before in the South. This is a whole new, but it's been good because we've had to have conversations about what are their perceptions of Christianity. And a lot of it comes from church hurt. That's what a lot of it comes from. When churches melted down, when parents stopped going, and sports. I had one kid, we were doing a lecture on slavery, and we were talking about the song Amazing Grace and how it came about. The slave ship captain who transformed his life wrote Amazing Grace. And somebody raised their hand and said, well, what does it sound like? I said, Amazing Grace? Yeah, can you play some for us? And they were like, the guys looked at him like, whoa, you don't. But he played baseball every Sunday morning. He was on a traveling team. So it's not that he just was uninterested. He was unchurched. So that's a new phenomenon that I'm starting to see with Gen Z and some millennials. They're just unchurched. It's just they never went. Or if they went with a grandma, but it never became something that was a part of their life.
Okay. So how do you make Jesus real to them?
You know what what I appreciate about them, they love sincerity. They want to see, are you just talking this stuff, or is this what you really believe? So what I try to do is be consistent with them. If I mess up, I apologize. I try to let them know. But what I've done, I've gotten smart about some ways to get guys to see the church differently. I tell them if they come to church and volunteer for a family fun day, a family picnic, they can get extra credit. So I've had guys show up, grades were borderline, they came for extra credit, and they're still coming. I mean, they became Christians. But, at a HBCU, a historically black college, university, you have a lot of liberties like that when it comes to church. And, nobody really cares. You take a kid to church, but I try to use creative ways for them to come to church and see that, man, this can be fun. This can be an experience. But it's just, but I appreciate it though. I appreciate, it reminds me of living in New York City. When I used to get on a train in New York City and share my faith, there were some people like, why are you talking to me? Leave me alone. No, I'm not interested. That just made it easy. You move on to the next person. And what was tough coming back to the South, everybody loves Jesus, everybody's happy, everybody's blessed, and they give you your own phone number, and it's like, okay. But with these guys, they're like, I'm not interested, but I'll talk to you. And I'm like, okay. So I think we have to constantly grow in the way we reach out to people. Because you're around young adults. I'm sure you've seen the changes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. It seems like community is big, and serving and being very non-judgment and lifestyles, and it's just, I would say, people are just really working hard. The youth are to love people and to look for the oppressed and try to make a difference. And that's where somehow we've got to instill ourselves in that kind of community they're a part of, so that we can help, be there to reach out with Jesus. So, yeah.
You know what? And that's real, because they really do love to serve. They love, like I tell guys, I need volunteers. They show up. When I was in college, you talking about serve and volunteer? I'm like, for what? That was not a spring break. We're gonna go build a what? You got to be out of your mind. I mean, that was the 80s. We weren't thinking about anybody but ourselves. But
Yep.
a lot of these guys, I give them credit. They will come and serve. So one day I was teaching a class, and I had this kid. He looked like a model, looked like a male model. Very good looking kid. Ladies man. He tried to put me on the spot. He said, Professor, since you are a minister and you're a Christian, what do you say about homosexuality? The room got quiet, and all the boys looked at me. I said, well, what I say about homosexuality is what I say to the guys who are heterosexuals. Sex with anybody you're not married to is a sin. Whoa. They got quiet, because what I wanted them to understand, we all have things to change. We all got to grow. And we just can't single out one sin because it doesn't happen to be ours and try to make people feel bad about it. So, I have guys who are struggling with their sexuality, and they come to class, we talk. They know I love them. They know I believe in them. And, I try to help everyone understand you're trying to figure it out. We're just trying to figure out this thing called life. And if you allow the Bible to help, it won't be as complicated. But we love you. And our motto at the Path is we meet you where you are. So if you're not ready right now, you can be a friend. I don't want anyone to feel ostracized or not welcome. So that's what we've been working on.
Cool. I like that. We meet you where you are. I'm gonna give the mic over to somebody else, but it's really good seeing you, brother.
It's good seeing you, Bob. Great talking to you.
All right.
Chris, do we have any questions coming in from any direction?
No, I don't have any questions either from Facebook or on the panel itself.
How about you?
I don't have anything specific in terms of a question, but I would say I want to kind of, bank back on the little conversation that you were talking about with respect to what people can do during these times, especially with having to be socially distant, having to be separated. I know for myself, being an extrovert stuck inside a house with one other person who I see every day for 24 hours a day, that's very difficult. It can be challenging. For introverts, it's a lot, easier for her because my wife, she very much enjoys being indoors. She enjoys not having to be social with too many people. So it can be challenging because here I am wanting to have a deep conversation with my wife, and she's like, I just want to relax. So the thing that I think I kind of want to talk about is maybe some different ways that maybe you would see or that we've seen other people rebuilding or continuing to kindle those external connections. I know that there's lots of Zoom meetings going on. There's phone calls being made. But I guess are there any other creative ways that people can continue to get connected either through the church or with the church or even with their community? I know that there's lots of people out there that are I think the Lomans are building masks and sending them out to different families.
Are you all completely sheltered in place, or can you go out in your neighborhood and go for walks?
So me and my wife can go out in our neighborhood. I think the farthest we've gone is to one of the local parks, right around the corner from here. That's about as far as we're supposed to go.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. We've lived in this neighborhood 4 years, and I have seen more neighbors than I've had in the whole 4 years I've lived here. And they are speaking, and they're saying hello, and they're waving. So I think there are opportunities out there, especially if you are more inclined to be an extrovert, just to have conversations with people, because people want to talk now. I think it's gotten kind of old. Even the introverts want to get out. People want to have conversations. So I think this is a great opportunity for Christians just to make friends, just to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
What are y'all doing about your groceries?
We've had to go to the grocery store only a few times. I buy a lot of the stuff that I need largely in bulk anyway, so I had a lot of stuff. So for right now, I think we're good. We haven't had to make too many trips out.
Yeah, sometimes I just go to the supermarket and walk up and down the aisles. What do they have here? But the one place I don't like is the post office. I don't like going. I've had to go a couple of times to mail stuff back, but gosh.
Well, maybe now is a good time for us to talk about our sponsor. Chris, when you were asking that question, your question was backing up to an earlier conversation we were having a while ago, but let's back up to the question that you had. What do you think? What do you think about the things that we should all be focused on now during this time that will help us maybe to change our environment? Any insights you're getting over there?
Are you asking me or Mike?
I'm asking you.
Oh.
You asked the question. I'm wondering, are we answering your question? I'd just like to dig on it a little bit deeper.
Okay, sure. So I think that the question was answered pretty fine.
Okay. That's good. Well, I think that's really one of the reasons why people are doing so many of these things. You've got a lot of reasons for the chatter that's going on and just the incredible noise on the internet, right? And I say noise, it's a lot of it's a joyful noise. It's good. There's a lot of churches like us. I mean, we have never ever, since I've been here anyway, been this active on the internet. Me personally, at least, almost everyone in the congregation has got a corporate job, knows a lot more about Zoom. You do these in meetings. You've done this stuff, but this is all new. But I think there's a number of reasons why you see all this activity, and most of it all comes from, hey, we're still the church. We're still disciples. What do we do? And everybody's trying to find a way, not just to stay connected with the Lord, but to stay connected with one another. And so much of our mission is about trying to be connected with people who aren't followers of Jesus. And how do we do that? So I think that a lot of what's going on right now is a lot of churches trying to figure out what do we do when you can't go to a physical building. We've said for years the church is really meeting in the homes, and we did that in our small groups. We've done that my whole adult life, but now it's like a step further. And I don't know. I think I wanted to ask a question, but I'm preaching, obviously, or I'm getting ready to just a little bit. I think God's getting us ready for something next.
More Catacomb Sundays?
What do you mean, Mike?
Catacomb Sunday. Man, that's when we did house churches for about 3 months in New York City. Wow. We had to do the whole service for months. Couldn't meet at the Beacon Theater. Didn't have it in the budget. So,
we went, we always had the small groups. But I've only been through Rome, I think, once. And I was there with Lisa. We were there for, maybe 24 hours, if even that. We're on our way to Africa. And, but we wanted to see stuff. Went to the Colosseum. That still was a spooky place to me. That was just so strange, thinking about our brothers and sisters dying, in that place. Inside, those are the walls. That's the place. But then the thing that had the even bigger impact on me was going to the catacombs. We went down to the catacombs, and the catacombs are just lined with bones, skulls, bones. I mean, the catacombs, it's a burial place. And we know from the early church fathers that that's where the disciples met. They literally went underground. The catacombs are pretty much under the city. And they went down into the catacombs. I always thought about when you took a visitor to church back then, and you're walking past you talk about counting the cost, about whether you want to follow Jesus or not. What do you mean about counting the cost? Well, you see, that was a disciple last week, and they went to the Colosseum. And now, why don't you become, a disciple? But I remember coming back from that trip, and I don't remember all the details about what was going on financially for the church or the growth. I remember thinking that not only do we need to meet in these small groups during the week, why don't we do it on Sundays for a while, and see what happens to the church? And we called them Catacomb Sundays. And then as time went on, anytime we couldn't get one of the larger facilities where we met, or one of Mike would call me from the Bronx, brother, we lost our building, whatever. I'd say, well, he said, I know what you're going to say, have a Catacomb Sunday. And it worked. So yeah, I maybe the Lord's, but I think I don't know. I think that there's, we ended last year, for me, really, everyone's talking about 2020. There is going to be, or was going to be, a big, meeting of our fellowship down in Florida. I don't know if that's still questionable. I haven't heard the latest news on it, and everyone's talking about their 2020 plans. And I've been doing this for years. I'm supposed to have some big plan, and all I could think of is we need a reboot. We we need some fresh start over. And I was reading, and I came on this idea of having a jubilee. And of course, you know, after 49 years, they'd have a year, they'd have a jubilee. And of course, you know, they had a Sabbath year every, you know, the 6th year, God would give you enough of an increase that the 7th year, you're supposed to rest your fields and everything. And then on the 50th year, after the 49 years, there's a debate about, was it 49? Anyway, in the 50th year, you had the Jubilee. And during that Jubilee, it was essentially a societal reboot. Slaves were supposed to be freed. Property was supposed to be returned to its original owners. And, you know, there's all sorts of caveats, and, you know, you don't have to return property if it's inside a wall. There's, you know, they had rules, but bottom line, it was a complete societal reboot. And I don't know, it was funny. I asked the congregation, I said, let's have a Jubilee. What, you know, what does that mean, Steve? Yeah, I don't know. Let's there's a few things. I knew that I wanted us to have, to not have a special contribution this year. We've been doing them for 40 years, and it's not that we don't want to give the Lord money, but I see an awful lot of people who've given, the older ones have given to the church for 30, 40 years, but they've not laid anything aside for retirement. They don't have anything. And I believe that we need to give a whole lot. If the Lord doesn't come soon and we make it through this pandemic, which we will, then we're going to have to give more. But I just, let's get stronger. Let's do something. The Lord has blessed the church here. We're not by any means a poor church. I mean, a rich church. But we're not. When you look at the rest of the world, we're not poor. Let's do some things different. And so I'm talking about the Jubilee and a reboot and man, then what happens? Look at us now. If this isn't a Jubilee, if this isn't a huge Sabbath rest of some sort, and
so this was your idea, huh?
Well, I had an idea, and then it seems like, and I'm not saying that there was a 6.5 earthquake and it's because I prayed. I'm saying, I'm just saying, in my little universe, it's like God said, "You want a Jubilee? I'll give you." You know, and I don't know what He was doing for everybody else, but this is. I don't know. You know me. You've always said it depends on, you know, what was it I'd preach a sermon and I'd say, was that okay? He says, well, you never know which Steve is going to show up. And the Steve that's here right now is a little bit distracted because of my dad, of course. And also, but I'm happy and I'm feeling a little tingly and excited because I think something great is about to happen, and we all could be a part of it. I don't think we all will be a part of it. I think a lot of us, I think we've got burdens and anchors and restrictions and things, but something you said a while ago, I think you said, I am more hopeful because of what I see in younger people. I see younger people who aren't exactly like I am now, but man, they're like I was when I was young. I'm seeing young people that want to change the world. And if we don't have anything to say that will help, then to me, there's a wagon coming along that we need to jump on or get behind and push or help, because I see a lot of young people who are giving their lives to Jesus. They were the first ones to say, let me deliver the food, let me go. You know, we've got young people right now putting themselves in harm's way. We had Juliana with us last night. She's finishing up her nursing degree. She's one of those nurses, young. She's just now graduating. She's already on as the front lines with this virus. One of our dear friends, like a daughter to me, Sarah, started to say Sarah Watson, and I'm going to mess up. Is it Middlecoff? Her married name. I was there. I know for the wedding. Anyway, there. She's a nurse in New York City, and so I see young people who have already given their lives to Jesus, and they're giving their hearts to serving people. I see young people who some of the biggest obstacles to them becoming Christians are Christians who are stuck with prejudices, people that have, we've talked about being disciples for years and years, but they see us being judgy. They see us not. So anyway, I'm tingly and I'm hopeful, and I feel like something big is happening, and somehow these kinds of connections are part of it. And I don't know which Steve showed up right then, but I went on a little bit too long, and
I would say, if I could add something to that, I mean, I would definitely agree that like this provides all of us an opportunity to like reevaluate ourselves and our connections with other people, and just see how we want to move forward. I think it's providing people an opportunity to kind of see like where maybe in some instances they lacked either connections with people or connections with their families, and it's providing us kind of a way to reset. I mean, we've been talking about the Jubilee, but I think in societally, it provides an opportunity for everybody to kind of step back from this world where everybody's so busy, always working, always trying to get to the next thing. But now, because of this virus, it's requiring everybody to just stop and just kind of be where they're at and be able to evaluate like themselves personally and be able to just kind of refocus, which is cool to see. So I appreciate you kind of sharing a little bit about that and how it affects us. I know Houston also had a question too.
I was going to say, yeah, it seems like we're getting a chance to take a 2020 vision look at ourselves, but I did have another question for Mike that came to mind. Mike was talking about the large agnostic presence at the campus, and I think that's probably true for a lot of campuses these days. And I thought of something that I think is important for being a better man is having like open mind and willingness to see things different ways. And with that, I thought, what is maybe one of your favorite lessons to teach and scriptures to use to teach that kind of a lesson of taking a second look or taking a different look, or maybe not having like a dogmatic approach to certain things, like people that will say, I'm very open-minded, I'm agnostic. It's like really they're not, like really they have a pretty dogmatic way that they're seeing the world. And so maybe just ways that you found that can help allow people to see things differently, and what's your favorite type of lesson to do for that?
Let's see. That's a very good question. Usually when I talk to someone who's agnostic, I try to dig down to see, how did you get there? And as I said, a lot of times it goes back to church hurt. And I try to help them separate church and Jesus. So what is it you're upset with Jesus about? Let's talk about that. What is it you don't agree with Jesus about? Okay, church. And I think what's very important is to validate what people say they have experienced or they're feeling. I think it doesn't help saying, no, you shouldn't feel that way, or you got to be more forgiving, but really allow people to work through the process of what had hurt them and to validate it. Because it's so unfair when a person is struggling and to try to pretend, it wasn't that bad. You still can be a Christian. You just need to forgive. And just taking it back to Jesus. I think that's one thing we learned living in New York. We had so many sermons about Jesus. Just go be like Jesus. Just love people like Jesus. Just try to introduce people to Jesus. And that's what I've taught here being in Atlanta. It's like, guys, all we can do is try to be like Jesus. Now, we're not going to be perfect. We're going to fall short, but at least let's point people back to Jesus. And what's cool is studying world religions and say, okay, let's talk about this world religion. Let's talk about Muhammad. Let's talk about Buddhism. Let's talk about Hinduism. What are the attributes? What's good about it? Yeah, okay, cool. Wow. Now, what was different about Christianity? What was different about Judaism? Just trying to help give them the tools to start looking at it from a logical perspective. So I have this friend, we've been reaching out to him probably about 4 years. The first time I met him, he came into my office. He's from Buffalo, New York. And he just talked, and he was a know-it-all. He just was going on and on and on and on. And then he ended up taking my class. And, you know, we got to know each other. He asked a lot of questions. And then he wanted to be combative about Christianity. And he said, well, the reason I don't believe, because when I was in youth group, I asked the pastor some questions that he couldn't answer. So I don't believe in y'all Christians anymore. I'm like, okay, you talked to me about dating advice. You talked to me about how to work with your family. You talked to me about your job situation. Okay, do you think I'm making this stuff up? I get it from the Bible. And even now, while we're going through this pandemic, I heard he's getting with the brothers, going to Bible studies with them in Zoom. And I'm like, man, you have put on me frustrations from your past. Can you just let today be a new day? What is it I have done that is so distasteful to you as a Christian? Oh, nothing. Okay. So but it's really Jesus. I think the more we can point people to Jesus, we'll all be much happier. Because, you know, I don't point people to the church, because the church will fail. The church will have struggles. The church will have issues. But we can be like the Jesus in the church. Because if we can make Jesus the focus, then I think more people's faith will be rooted in Jesus more so than in people. So that's what I try to do. Just point people back to Jesus.
And on that note, we're going to have to say goodnight. And thank you, Mike, so much for being here. Mike and I had a conversation the other day that we were putting on a thing we call intermission. And you can find that on our website, portlandchurch.org. And Anthony, I see you over there. Lord willing, tomorrow night, we're going to have Michael Burns and a group with us to talk to him at 7:30 here again on the Brothers Show. And I hope everybody is staying safe, washing your hands, not touching your face, trying to either be like Jesus or at least search what in the world does that mean.
Right.
But with these thoughts in mind, Carl, why don't you play us out? I'd like to hear that theme song one more time.
The Brothers Show. The Brothers Show.
Thanks, Steve. Y'all have a good night.
The Brothers Show.
Very much.
Tonight.